The dusty gravel road wound through miles of oak-studded ranch land before it reached a wide iron gate. Beyond it lay 300 acres of rolling pasture, creeks twisting through the valley, and a modest ranch house overlooking it all. The land had belonged to one man's family for 3 generations, long before the luxury subdivision and its overzealous HOA crept up on the edges. The trouble began the day he returned home from a 6-month deployment to find a brightly colored notice stapled to his front gate. The HOA, led by its notorious president, a woman neighbors quietly called Karen in heels, claimed that his ranch violated community standards because of its fencing, livestock, and even the color of his barn. The man shook his head. His land wasn't part of their subdivision. He had never signed their bylaws, never paid their dues, and certainly never agreed to their architectural review process. But Karen wasn't the type to take no for an answer. Within days, she was parked at his gate in a spotless SUV, pointing at his cattle and accusing him of lowering property values. She demanded he attend HOA meetings, repaint his barn, and clean up his working ranch to match their manicured lawns. When he told her politely but firmly that his land wasn't under her control, she stormed off. 2 mornings later, the man woke to flashing lights. The HOA had called the sheriff's office, claiming his ranch was an unauthorized dwelling and that he was trespassing on association land. Deputies rolled up expecting to confront a squatter. What they found was a decorated officer standing on his own porch, calm and unbothered. The deputies hesitated. They recognized him instantly, not just as a landowner, but as a high-ranking military officer with jurisdiction that eclipsed their own. He outranked even the sheriff who supervised them. But before they could explain this to Karen, she arrived in full fury, berating everyone and demanding they drag him off his own property. The deputies tried to reason with her, pointing out that the ranch wasn't under HOA authority. But Karen refused to listen. She threatened to go above their heads, completely unaware that the man she was targeting already had more authority than anyone she could call. Rather than argue, the ranch owner let her rant. He knew power didn't come from shouting. It came from paperwork, rank, and patience. Still, he couldn't ignore that Karen was escalating. She crossed from nuisance into outright harassment. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, he began reviewing legal documents. He gathered proof of his property boundaries, confirmed that no deed restrictions existed, and contacted a few friends in both county government and state law enforcement. If Karen wanted to play power games, she was about to learn the hard way how little power she truly had. The next day, he returned to his normal routine, feeding cattle, checking fences, and walking the property with his working dogs. But even as he worked, HOA vehicles circled the edge of his land. Karen had stationed volunteers at every corner of the subdivision, photographing his ranch as though documenting crimes. Neighbors who once stayed silent started to grumble. Many respected him for his service. They didn't like Karen's heavy-handed tactics, but they feared her fines and threats. What none of them realized was that she was about to overplay her hand, because while she wasted her energy writing bogus violation letters and pestering deputies, he was quietly preparing something much bigger, a decisive move that wouldn't just stop her harassment, but dismantle her authority entirely. The stage was set. Karen thought she had the law on her side. She had no idea the man she was fighting had both the rank and the connections to shut her down permanently. And when he finally decided to act, he wouldn't need to raise his voice or lift a finger in anger. One signature would do the job. By the end of the week, Karen had convinced herself she was winning. She paraded around the neighborhood bragging that the sheriff's office had responded to her complaint and that the ranch owner would soon be forced into compliance. What she didn't know was that the deputies had left the property embarrassed, knowing they'd been dragged into a civil dispute they had no jurisdiction over. The man didn't waste time arguing with her. Instead, he used his military background to gather facts with precision. He pulled property records from the county clerk's office, proving his ranch had been in his family for decades. He spoke with his commanding officer to make sure there were no conflicts of interest should his position come up publicly. Most importantly, he placed calls to several state officials who respected his service record. Karen kept escalating. She had the HOA send certified letters demanding he remove his cattle, repaint his barn, and attend a mandatory compliance hearing. She parked her SUV outside his gate for hours, snapping pictures of every tractor and every delivery truck. She even started circulating rumors at HOA meetings, calling him a danger to the community and claiming his ranch might be used for illegal activities. But Karen made a crucial mistake. She filed a formal complaint with the county zoning office, claiming that his home was not an approved dwelling and asking that he be evicted. That triggered an official review, and within days, the man's phone rang. Not from the zoning office, but from the sheriff himself. The sheriff, an old acquaintance, was livid, not at the rancher, but at Karen. He knew exactly who he was dealing with, a senior military officer whose jurisdiction outranked his own. The sheriff promised to personally squash any further harassment attempts. The man politely declined the favor. He didn't want special treatment. What he wanted was to let Karen dig her own hole, so deep that no one could mistake her intentions again. If she wanted to turn this into a war, he would make sure the fallout was public, decisive, and permanent. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. At the next HOA board meeting, she waved printed photographs of his ranch and declared that no one is above HOA rules. She whipped her supporters into a frenzy, convincing them to allocate thousands of dollars from HOA funds toward legal action. What no one realized was that those legal actions would go nowhere. The HOA attorney sent threatening letters, which were promptly answered by the man's own counsel, shutting them down point by point. The rancher didn't even have to appear. He had proof, rank, and the law on his side. But he wasn't satisfied just defending himself. He began to think bigger. What if he could take away Karen's power entirely? What if this HOA, which had harassed not just him but dozens of other homeowners, could be exposed for its misuse of authority? He started making quiet visits to neighbors. Without boasting about his rank, he explained their property rights and how HOAs could be reined in when they overstepped. More and more residents listened. Some shared stories of Karen threatening them over garden sheds, flags, even paint colors. The rancher took careful notes. Then came the tipping point. Karen, frustrated by her lack of progress, called the police again, this time demanding a full eviction. When deputies arrived, they didn't even bother with formalities. They saluted the rancher, apologized for the inconvenience, and told Karen to leave immediately. The moment went viral. A passerby had filmed on their phone. Karen shouting at uniformed deputies, the deputies refusing to act, and the ranch owner calmly explaining that she had no authority over his land. Within hours, the video hit social media. By morning, thousands of viewers were mocking Karen as the HOA tyrant who tried to evict the wrong man. Humiliation only fueled her anger. She vowed to take it to the top, still unaware that the man she was fighting already was atop. And now, the rancher decided it was time to end this once and for all. He wasn't going to just stop Karen. He was going to dismantle her entire HOA. The HOA doubled its legal budget, convinced Karen's vendetta was a righteous cause. But residents started noticing where their dues were going, not to neighborhood maintenance, but to endless fights with a man who had done nothing wrong. The rancher's quiet outreach paid off. Homeowners who once feared Karen began questioning her leadership. At the same time, the man prepared his final move. Using his military connections and legal team, he gathered every complaint neighbors had filed against the HOA over the years. He compiled invoices showing thousands wasted on frivolous lawsuits. He documented Karen's abuse of authority, the surveillance, the intimidation, and her repeated misuse of law enforcement. When the next HOA board meeting came, the room was packed. Karen expected to lead another attack on the rancher. Instead, she was met with a wall of angry residents and a deputy sheriff. There at the rancher's request to keep order, the rancher himself stood at the back, silent, letting the evidence speak. One by one, neighbors told stories of harassment. Photos, emails, and legal letters were read aloud. The HOA's credibility collapsed in real time. Then came the moment no one saw coming. The sheriff, a personal friend of the rancher, stood before the board and calmly stated that the man Karen had been harassing was a decorated officer with jurisdiction higher than his own. Any further false reports would be treated as criminal harassment against her. The room erupted. Homeowners voted on the spot to remove Karen as HOA president. Her allies resigned under pressure, and the HOA's legal fund was frozen pending a full audit. By the end of the night, Karen walked out red-faced, booed by the same people she once bullied. The rancher didn't gloat. He simply restored peace. With Karen gone, the HOA dropped its complaints entirely, and the community quietly voted to scale back its powers. The rancher went back to his cattle, his lake, and his quiet life. But his neighbors never forgot how calmly and decisively he'd handled her campaign. Karen tried to save face online, blaming corruption and favoritism. But the viral video of her shouting at deputies while they saluted the man she hated told the real story. She never regained her influence. And the rancher? He proved that power isn't about shouting the loudest or calling the cops the most. It's about knowing who you are, where you stand, and when to make your move. The HOA never bothered him again. And every time a neighbor stopped by to thank him, he just smiled and went back to work,